I want you guys to know that I am praying for all of my extrovert friends. I know that this is kind of a rough season for the extroverts. I'm also praying for our introverts, and here's why. I am married to one. And so the advice is same, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Here's what I want to say to you. Whether you're extrovert or introvert, here's what I want to say to you. This is temporary. For the extroverts, like this won't last forever. It's going to be okay. If you're an introvert, don't get too used to it. It's just a season. Here's a challenge, and I think right now is a great opportunity. I think we are in a season right now where this is a challenge that is absolutely doable. Here's what I want to challenge you to. The next time there's a clear night, when there's a clear night with no cloud cover, what I want to challenge you to do, no matter where you live, no matter where you're from, even if you're listening to this 5 years down the road, here's what I want to challenge you to do. The next time there's a clear night, I want you to lay a blanket down. I don't mean just glance. Lay a blanket down and take in the stars for a minute to this point right here. Here's what I want you to think about. Each star that we can't count is a sun in its own area. And they're saying that each star that we're able to visibly see with our own eye is probably bigger than our sun. So the next time that you get the opportunity, and I'm serious, do it with your family, do it with people that you are in quarantine with. Like, go take a minute, lay a blanket down, and just in silence, stay there and sit there and consider how vast the world is. And here's what will happen. If you do it long enough, you stay there long enough and you do it in silence, it's not like a social gathering. You're not out there just chatting it up. If you'll just sit there and take in what it is that you're looking at, they're also saying that a lot of the stars that you're seeing have already burned out. They actually burned out before you were born, but it took the light that long to travel from where it was to where you are. I mean, we turn a light switch on in your bedroom, it's light instantly. The speed of light is so fast, and it's moving from where that light originated to your eye after the star itself is burned out. If you'll do this, if you'll take this seriously, if you'll actually do it, here's what will happen. If you stare at it long enough, a window will open. We talked about it last week that there are times in life when windows open, like after the loss of a loved one. It's like we see life for more clearly. When we have a near-death experience, we see things more clearly. We understand more about perspective in those little moments where the windows are open. And the same thing will happen if you go out and just take in the vastness of the universe. If you can just allow yourself to do it and stay there until this begins to happen, the vastness of the universe and what that means for how small our little galaxy is. And not only how small our little galaxy is, but how small our little planet is in that little whole system that we've got going on. And then consider that our planet, for as small as it is, we are so small. And not only that, but our planet is old and we are not going to live for very long. What happens is, and it happens to everybody, I don't know anybody that hasn't experienced this at some point, is you start to begin to feel, the window opens and you begin to feel how small you are. And I don't think that's bad. Here's the truth, is that you are always small. In temper tantrums, in moments of frustration, in moments where you're stressing out about how you're going to pay the bills, in moments where you're just zoning out watching the TV, you've always been small, but if you're not paying attention, that window can close and you can forget it and you can begin to live as though the world needs you in it to work. See what I mean? Here's what I'm saying. The window opens and you see something that was always true, but when the window's closed, it's still true, you just may not see it. I want to go to Luke chapter 8, verse 43, and I'm going to talk about a story that probably most of us have heard. This is sort of one of the greatest hits in most churches. Most churches have heard this story, but I think because of the nature of where this woman was at and the nature of where we are as a nation right now, I think we're going to see it a little differently. Let me read it to you. In the crowd that day, there was a woman who for 12 years had been afflicted with hemorrhages. I'm reading it out of the Message Bible. I just feel like it's a more kind version of this story. You can look it up in any version you want. I'm reading it out of the Message. She had spent every penny she had on doctors, but not one had been able to help her. She slipped in from behind and touched the edge of Jesus' robe. At that very moment, her hemorrhaging stopped, and Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When no one stepped forward, Peter said, "But Master, we've got crowds of people on our hands. Dozens have touched you." Verse 46, Jesus insisted, "Someone touched me. I felt power discharging from me." Verse 47, when the woman realized that she couldn't remain hidden, she knelt trembling before him. In front of all the people, she blurted out her story, why she touched him, and how at the same moment she was healed. Verse 48, Jesus said, "Daughter, you took a risk trusting me, and now you're healed and whole. Live well, live blessed." So here's the truth of this story is that I have read that story probably once or twice a year as long as I've known Jesus my entire life. It always gets brought up. You hear it in sermons. You hear it referenced. But here's some concepts about this story that are more specifically unique for where we are. Her story has never changed. In the Bible, her story has never changed. We've always heard it. But our perspective changes, and sometimes when our perspective changes, we can see the same information with a new perspective. Just like looking at the stars, it reminds you of a new truth. Like what we're going to see in this woman's story is this, is that her deeper revelation of Jesus came because she was being forced into, ready for this? Because of her health issue, she had been forced into what was called, she was ceremonially unclean. She was considered unclean, and let me say it this way, because we've heard those words before, but let me say it this way. For 12 years, she had been in quarantine. She had been pushed to the edges for 12 years. Now, if you just said that a month ago, people would be like, yeah, we heard this story. Now, look, our perspective is open. We have a window open to hear her story and go, oh, I get it. I get why that would be challenging. She had been in quarantine for 12 years. She had lost everything financially. Everything that she had lost, she'd lost to the doctors, and the doctors couldn't help her. So she was in quarantine. She had tested positive, and she was 100% contagious. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you were unclean in that day and you touched something, that was considered unclean also. So everything she would have touched would have also been unclean. She was contagious. She was infected, and she was contagious. Do you see why all of a sudden her story and our story, we go, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute, the window's open. I can see it now a little bit differently. And it's a window to hear her story at a more personal level. Actually, I'll say this. This is probably the first time in my life I've ever looked at her story and felt like I had something in common with it. Like, I've heard her story before, and I never felt personally connected to it. Now I hear her story, and there's a little part of it that I go, wait a minute, I think I maybe understand her position maybe a little bit better. We'll start at the beginning. In the crowd that day, there was a woman who for 12 years, for 12 years, we go back 12 years to 2008. I don't know what you were doing in 2008. Most of the people who work for us were probably in kindergarten, somewhere in there. They're always teasing me about being old. I get my jabs in on camera. 2008. So since 2008, she had been infected with, let's call it, for the sake of conversation, she'd had the coronavirus. She had this illness that had caused her to be isolated and quarantined and pushed away from society. And not only did she have it, everyone knew she had it. So she was socially outcast too because they didn't want to get it. I mean, that's what is so interesting to me about our time right now is not the people who are getting sick or the people who are going broke. As bad as those things are, it's the reaction of people who are just panicked in their fear. That to me is the most frustrating part. Like, we get that there are difficulties. We get that there is sickness. We get that there are challenges. I get it. But what we don't have to succumb to is the panic, the group panic. You have a choice to overcome that. Different sermon. Okay. She'd spent every penny she had on doctors, but none had been able to help her. So we know that physically she had been tortured. I mean, she had been facing a physical issue and the anemia that comes with that. I mean, we don't have to go too far down the biology lesson, but she had suffered physically for 12 years. And I don't know about you, but like if I have a headache that lasts for too long, I get in a terrible mood. Like I've had chronic hip pain. I know what it's like to be in pain over a long period of time, and it literally has the ability to affect your mental health. So she was physically tortured. She had been socially rejected. I want to clear something up, and I hope there are some there's some legalism teachers listening. I hope they are. I hope they're tuning in. And if you're watching on camera, I'm going to talk to you for just a second, and everybody else gets to listen. If you are a preacher who would dare say that sickness is a punishment for an inferior faith, if you would go as far as to say, well, if you're suffering with your sickness and you were to misquote what the Bible says, by his stripes you are healed, not of your sins, but of your sin, and that everything that was due to you is now being healed on an eternal scale, and you would dare say that someone's sickness is an inferior health, what you are appealing to, let me just clarify, what you are appealing to is a justice scale. You do bad things, you get bad results. You do good things, you get good results. You are playing on a justice scale. And to play on the justice scale, you have to discount the unfairness of the cross. Because the cross was immeasurably unfair. But because of the unfairness of the cross, it opens the door for us as people to begin to operate on the mercy scale, a scale that says it is unfair to my own advantage. So when you go back to a justice scale and go, well, if you know somebody that's got sick, maybe there's some things in their life you don't know about, what you're doing is you are calling down fire on your own head. You are calling for a justice that you can't even fulfill. But we know that she was socially rejected because as people, we have this tendency to as a group, to move away from things that make us uncomfortable, to move us away from things that create distance with things that make us uncomfortable. When there's something that's gross or difficult or challenging, our natural response is to move away from it. That's why the first responders that are running into the challenges are such heroes, is they're going against human nature, which is to move away from things that make us uncomfortable. So just at a personal level, can we please get over the justice scale of that God's angry, and this is the result of God's anger, and he's been pushed to his limits. Can I just tell you something? God doesn't have his limits. He has his parameters. He has his principles. Like, God is a God of principles. You're not pushing God to his limits. God's not your parent. God is not having a bad day. God is not going through some issues. God is not having a challenging season. God is God, and you have not pushed him to his limits. This is not the result of an angry God getting mad at us and thus taking it out on us. Because what do you tell somebody whose sweet little old grandma has passed away because of this? What, that God was mad at her? Come on. Spiritually exhausted. Don't you think she lost everything she owns? She tried everything. Don't you know that she had done everything she knew to do? And there's nothing more exhausting than feeling like you've gotten to the end of your rope. You have done everything that you know to do, and nothing has worked. It says that she slipped in from behind and touched the edge of Jesus' robe. I want to make sure we catch what just happened here. She's unclean. She has the virus. And she ignores her quarantine. If you're about to think that I'm going to take this to don't obey the quarantine, that's not what I'm saying. That's not this sermon. I'm just telling you what she did. It's not prescriptive. I'm not telling you do what she did. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we see it in her story that she had to ignore a quarantine, because it wasn't a national quarantine like we're under where it's socially acceptable. It was specifically, uniquely designed for her. You stay away. And she didn't. She was slipping through the crowd. Let me tell you something. If you have the virus and you are contagious, slipping through the crowd is a very uncool thing to do. Very uncool. Based on the risk that she was taking, what we know is that it is an act of a desperate person. She, in her own mind, has come to a place where she realizes it is time to make a desperate act to get to Jesus. And maybe, in fact, in her mind, this was her last chance. Maybe this was her last chance to have an experience. And let me remind you, you don't have to understand your problem to believe that Jesus is the solution. Let me say this again. Let me just paint a picture for you. If Jet is 11 years old and he goes, "Dad, can I drive to town?" What he's saying is, I just want independence. I just want to be free. I just want to be independent. And I think driving will give me that. But if I'm a dad, if I'm a good dad, then what I'll say is, Jet, if what you're wanting is independence, you need to take your school more serious. Because your education is going to provide you with far more independence than me letting you drive will ever be able to do. I know that's a little bit of a mind exercise, it's a thought exercise, but if what I'm asking God for is independence, he may come back and give me an answer that doesn't look like the solution that I asked for. Maybe she saw this as her last chance. Can I remind you that even when you're down to your last chance, it's still a chance? She saw a window. How's that? Is that a better way to say it? She saw an open window. This woman who had been oppressed and rejected and isolated and quarantined and contagious and everything that you don't want to be, she had been for 12 years, but she saw a window. She saw a window open up because she heard Jesus was coming by. And like I said, she went to Jesus for a solution, and maybe she didn't even understand her problem. That's what we do a lot of times. We go to Jesus and we go, "Jesus, we believe you're the solution." And Jesus goes, "No, that's true, I am. What you don't necessarily understand is your problem yet." You see that by slipping up behind what she was hoping for is that this whole ordeal just blow over. She just wants to get her little healing. She doesn't want to be noticed. She doesn't want to be seen. She has already accepted the absence of importance in her own identity. She didn't think of herself as being important. She didn't announce her presence. She didn't walk in and go, "Jesus, it's me." She snuck in and she wanted to be healed and not noticed. She wanted to be healed and slip away because what she needed was not only a physical healing, she needed a spiritual healing. She needed someone to validate the importance of her identity. But see, she didn't know that. She's going to Jesus for a physical healing, but what Jesus knew that she needed was also a spiritual healing. Because what good is it if you experience your healing and then you just go hide and you disappear and it doesn't change your life for the better? At that very moment, her hemorrhaging stopped. See, that's what we're seeing with Jesus. And that's what I'm going to bang this drum from now until the time I die, is that Jesus said, you're healed. When the unclean touches the clean becomes unclean. But when the unclean touched Jesus, the unclean became clean. So this idea that you're going to go to Jesus with some sort of a performance so that you can earn it is going back to an old scale that says, based on my goodness, I'm going to earn it. Jesus goes, that is not how it works. Your cleanliness does not come from scrubbing, because the more you scrub, the worse you get. Your cleanliness comes from Jesus based on his godness, not your goodness. You guys know I struggle with cliches, but I think that one might be a good one. There was no steps. She didn't sneak up behind him and Jesus turned around and hand her like a pamphlet or a workbook, or here, you fill this out and you go to this college and you go through this program and you do this and you get this human validation and you perform this and you do that and you have enough faith. Now, if you have enough faith, then there was no steps. There was just, it's clean. That's it. She touches Jesus and she's instantly clean. Jesus said, who touched me? Why did he say that? He already knew. He already knew who was desperate and reached out and touched him in desperation. He already knew. So why did he stop, turn around, and bring her to the forefront, which, by the way, is not what she wanted? Jesus went against her wishes. He says, who touched me? What are you saying? He's saying, the person who touched me matters to me, and they need to know it. They need to know. She needs to know that I knew she was coming today. I know where she's been. I know where she is, and she touched me, but she needs to know that she matters to me. Because if she would have snuck in and stole it from Jesus, she could have thought it was her own power. It was under my own power that I snuck in and I got something from Jesus. Jesus turned and said, let's directly, head on, let's face this. You just touched me because you thought I was a solution, and I'm not just going to stop at a spiritual or physical healing. We're going to go into spiritual healing. Okay. Listen to this. This is where it starts to get good. When no one stepped forward, Peter said, but Master, we've got crowds of people on our hands. Dozens have touched you. Now, if there's all these people around, it's talking, it's loud. I mean, it's dusty, there's people, it's smelly, it's hot, there's lots going on. So it wasn't like Jesus just peacefully turned and was like, hey. It's chaos. Hey, who touched me? Why is he doing that? Why is he doing that? He's bringing their attention to it also. He didn't just turn and talk to the woman. It was chaotic enough with all those people. He could have talked to her right there, and him and her could have had an agreement. He was teaching all of them something based on her story. Who touched me? Hey, come here, snap. Look, who touched me? And they're like, dozens have touched you. What? You can look at my notes. I wish I could show you my notes. I've got like 7 question marks behind that word. What? Dozens of people that day had touched Jesus. They had rubbed shoulders with Jesus. They had experienced as much physical proximity to Jesus as this woman, only they got nothing. They got nothing. They touched Jesus, the same Jesus on the same day that healed this woman of a 12-year issue and brought her back into society and restored her and brought her back in. Dozens of other people brushed up next to Jesus and nothing happened. It wasn't about the attendance. Church people, it wasn't about the proximity, because there were people that were close to Jesus that were getting nothing. The people whose windows were closed. Now, if you're like me, and you see that there were people that were there because Jesus was in style. They brought their kids to get like an Instagram picture with him. Maybe they're following the hype. Maybe he's got something for me. Don't you think there were people that are like, hey, maybe there's something I can get from him? And they touch Jesus, and their reaction from Jesus, from the person of Jesus was, He was right there in the midst of all this chaos. He was right there, and they touched him, and nothing happened. The window was closed. Their window was closed. But why? If you're like me, why? Why was this person able to touch Jesus and literally get nothing from it when this lady over here snuck through, just barely touches the hem of his garment, and she experiences life-changing restoration? Why is that? Because the truth is, everybody that was there, apologetics will tell us that everybody that was there needed Jesus as much as she did. It's easy to see because of her desperate state, because of her desperate situation. It would be easy to see, obviously, she needed Jesus, but they all needed Jesus. What we know is that they all needed Jesus just as much as she did. You ready for this? Their windows were closed. Why? Their comfort or their lack of desperation. Let me say it this way. The fact that they failed to see their desperation, the fact that the window was closed and they weren't able to see how desperate they were for Jesus. I had it written down as that they were disadvantaged, but I'm going to say it this way. They were at a proper vantage. They didn't have the proper viewpoint. They weren't viewing the situation through the correct window. They were seeing it, but their comfort had caused them to pull back into themselves. This is so important. They weren't that uncomfortable. They were there for Jesus, but you don't see them crawling to get to him in desperation. They're just casually observing Jesus. Does this scare you to think that there will be people who are in the right church? They're in the right building. They're listening to the right sermons. They're sharing the right songs. They're in the proximity of Jesus. Maybe they're rubbing shoulders with Jesus and nothing is happening because the desperation that they have, they don't see. The window's closed. Verse 48, Jesus said, "Daughter, you took a risk trusting me, and now you're healed and whole. Live well, live blessed." See, her desperation was visible. She was able to see it. She knew she was desperate. She had nothing else to depend on. Do you know why I think the Bible mentions that she was broke? Because there was other people that were probably broke that the Bible didn't mention that detail. The reason it mentions that detail with her is that if she was thinking, maybe there's another doctor out there, even if there was, she couldn't have afforded it. There's no socialized medicine. Even if there was a doctor that had a solution, oh my gosh, you guys, can we please, if you're taking notes, can you please make sure to get this point? She had been brought to a place that even if somebody would have had a solution, she couldn't have afforded it. What does that tell you about what Jesus is asking from you to accept his goodness? He's the good doctor, and he finds himself healing someone who had nothing to give him. See, any other doctor would have required payment, and she had nothing. When she found Jesus, Jesus required nothing except everything. What if we said it this way? Maybe what she didn't realize at the time, what she didn't see, what she wasn't able to fully understand was that it was her desperation, it was her lack of options, it was her absolute state of complete and utter hopelessness. Can I say it this way? It was a desperation that had opened the window for her. It wasn't opportunity that opened the window. It was desperation that opened the window because she had no other options. And when she saw Jesus, she recognized it as an opportunity. That is how people could see Jesus and get nothing from it. Bump up next to him. Hey, did you meet Jesus? Yeah. It's crazy, but a good economy, a really strong good economy is not good for churches. Because it closes our window. It closes a lot of people's window that they're not desperate, they're not concerned, they're not broken, they're fine. How was church? It was good. What do you talk about? I don't know. Was Jesus there? Probably. You touch Jesus and nothing happens. She wasn't there for Jesus, the man, or the hype, or the fad, or the teacher. She wasn't there for any of that, because if she'd have been there for that, she would have been with the crowd. She was sneaking in because she was hopeful that Jesus was who he said he was. She was chasing Jesus as her only solution. Let me say it this way. Let's go back to the beginning with the challenge of looking at the stars. When she was aware of her smallness, her own insignificance, her own desperation, it allowed her to see Jesus as a solution. If nothing ever reminds us of our smallness, if nothing ever shows us our own weakness, if nothing ever shows us, if we're not able to see our desperation, we'll glance at Jesus and keep moving. Desperation forced the window open. She saw Jesus. Are you experiencing this right now? Can I ask, like at a personal level, aren't we experiencing this right now? That all of a sudden things are a little shaky and it's causing people to re-examine Jesus again? That all of a sudden Jesus is coming back into focus? And maybe not that you walked away from him. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you turned on Jesus or anything crazy like that. But maybe you just kind of were busy. You were just doing stuff. Maybe you were aware of Jesus and you thought, Jesus is aware of me and like we're doing okay. But now all of a sudden you're having this moment of like you're looking back to him now with a new level of desperation. What you're experiencing is an open window. Can I say it this way about the woman? Can I say it this way about the United States? Can I say this today about where we are? Is that she was able to experience a life-saving desperation. She had found herself in a life-saving desperation. You know how I know when I'm not there? I'm trying to control everything. Trying to control this. I'm trying to oversee that. I feel so much stress and anxiety. And if you struggle with stress and anxiety, a lot of times it's because you haven't accepted your own littleness. I think I'm big enough I can handle this. I think I'm big enough I can control this or I can do that. And I find myself in stress and anxiety and control. And that's what happens when I forget God's bigness and my smallness and I try to exchange it. Maybe God's not big enough. Maybe I'm supposed to do it. And all of a sudden I find myself in this chaos until eventually I don't even see Jesus anymore. I'm trying to do it myself. The stars, here's why I want you to do that. Here's why I want you to go look at the stars, is that they've always been there. There have been nights you've got out of your car and walked in the house, walked right under that exact same blanket of stars and never stopped to consider it. They've always been there. We just forget it. Death has always been there. We just don't think about it. Jesus has always been good. We just stop forget it. We start to forget it. We stop thinking about it. There are things that we lose when we don't dwell on them. If we don't dwell on them, if we don't make time to give them our thoughts and our focus, then we forget about them and they move to the back of our minds until we don't think about them at all. Every now and then we need something that'll snap the fingers in front of our face, sort of that wake-up moment. What we're experiencing with an open window, what I'm saying is like it's as a nation, what we've had happen is that the world has gone, hey, whoa, wait a minute. And we look up at the stars, we're like, oh, wait a minute, that's right. I'm little. The universe is big. God is good. I'm in need. I'm desperate. And that moment of desperation is what opens the window so that you see Jesus. Let me put it into perspective. Let me say it this way. Where is that woman today? 2020. Where is the woman that Jesus healed that day? She's not with her healing anymore. She doesn't need it. She gave that body back. She was done with it. It got used up. She gave it back. Everybody who experienced a healing from Jesus then in the Bible, everybody that you see in the Bible that got healed, they gave that body back. Eventually, that healing came with an expiration date, and they go, that's it. I'm done. You can have it back. It was when Jesus turned and said, who touched me? That's where she is today. That's where she is today. When Jesus turned and goes, you are important to me. Not the you that's going to get buried someday. Not the you that's going to give it all back someday. That's temporary. The you that will always be. That's who I want to know. And I need you to know that matters. I need you to know. Church, I need you to know, wherever you're watching this, that when Jesus saves you and restores you, he's not saving your physical body. He's not saving your finances. He's not saving your job. All that goes back. He's saving a you that continues to live in that healing eternally. Here's a scary question, and I'm not a fear guy. I mean, if you know me at all, you know this is not a fear message or a fear concept. But let me ask you something. What about the people that weren't desperate for Jesus in the moment? Where are they? Where are the people who gave Jesus sort of a casual look, but they just didn't see their own desperation? They are now no longer in the proximity of Jesus, and all they have left is their desperation. Now, if you would say to yourself, well, that feels like fear-mongering, I want to work through that. But if it's true, I want to be aware of it. Because what she experienced in her desperation gave her a giant advantage. What the world said was the end of the road or the end of hope was what opened a window for an eternal relationship. It comes down to choice. It comes down to choice. Like in life, are we going to be willing to go look at the stars every now and then? To go conceptualize the goodness of God, the bigness of God, the injustice of the cross? Are we willing to give that time to bring things back into perspective? Or are we going to take advantage of a window that's open right now? Because if you would go, how can this be a window that's open? I'm desperate. That is the window. That's the window that drove this lady into an eternal relationship with Jesus. It was the desperation that opened the window so that she could even see Jesus. Let's pray. Lord, what I'm asking is in this season that we're given perspective, that we have a vantage point that shows us who you are and who we are. The truth is, God, everybody was equally desperate. Everybody was equally desperate for Jesus, but it was the desperate in the moment she was able to see it. Lord, we're asking that you give us your perspective. Let us see things that are true. Let us see these in this moment of opportunity, God, that we dwell on the things that are true. Lord, that we have that moment where we go look at the stars and try to absorb how little we really are and how good you really are. Lord, you put life back into perspective, because when you do, Lord, there's a sweetness that comes with that. Lord, the anxiety begins to go away, the desire to control and be in charge. When we realize we can't control it, we can have more peace in our life. God, that actually the anxiety is a window into peace. God, our panic can be a window into peace if we see Jesus when we open the window. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.